So nervous system, a little bit of biology for you guys now. Okay, so our nervous system is basically our brain and all the nerves in our body that are connected together. And the nervous system organizes and integrates sensory and emotional information. So that's how we make sense of the world around us, and by the nerves in our body and our brain. So our brain is formed with 1 billion of neurons that create paths that are established by repetition. And so we are constantly creating those paths with our neurons and in our brains. And that crucial age of 0 to 5 years old is when there is a ton of connections being made. And that's one of the reasons why trauma at that age has a really important impact. One of the examples of a path that's very well formed is writing your name, for instance. You don't really have to think about it. When you write your name, it's automatic. It's something that path has been well worn, right? You've done it 1 billion times. On the other hand, if you were to write your name with your non-dominant hand, it would be awkward, and it would be hard to do those first few times. But if you did it, 20 times a day for every day, that path would become very well defined. It's kind of like when there's a new snowfall, for instance, and that first time you walk through the snow, it's going to be hard to walk through and create a path. But as people walk through that same path, it becomes easier. And that's the same way that we develop connections in our brain. So neuroplasticity, you might have heard this term before. It's basically the capacity to create those new paths, those new connections. In the past, we used to think that by the age of 5, your brain was fully developed, and there was kind of not much you can develop. It doesn't develop anymore. As an adult, it's fully formed. There's no new connections. And then by the time you get to my age, it kind of slowly starts to decline. Now we know with neuroplasticity is that we can create new paths. The older you get, it does become a little bit harder, but it also means that a child who has experienced trauma can create new connections and can learn new ways, and can, instead of having a survival response to all situations, can create new connections that will help them navigate the world around them. Now, the nervous system is divided in two systems. You have the sympathetic nervous system and the parasympathetic. Now, sympathetic is the part that's kind of like energizing. When we think about it, it's kind of like pressing the gas pedal. So as we move through this, we're going to talk about the gas pedal and the brake instead of sympathetic and parasympathetic, because that's confusing. But the gas pedal is everything that energizes you, that excites you. It can be activated by positive things and negative things. Any kind of stimulus, stress, increases that energy. And on a biological level, it increases your blood pressure. It makes your heart beat faster. You breathe faster. So anything that engages the sympathetic nervous system is like the gas pedal. The parasympathetic nervous system is like the brakes. It's energy conserving. It reduces your heart rate. It calms you down, and sometimes to the point of disconnecting almost. So when we think of the survival response, fight or flight is the gas pedal, and freeze is the brake. Now, when a child experiences trauma, it distorts the way the nervous system reacts. Sometimes it'll be the gas pedal when there is no danger, or it can be the brakes at other times. I just wanted to say one more thing, and I forgot what I was going to say. It can be influenced by genetics, by a child's temperament. When we think of, for instance, going to sleep at night, normally it should be the brake that's activated, right? Calming down the system, your breathing slows down, your heartbeat slows down when you go to sleep. But sometimes it's the gas pedal that's going, right? That's probably happened to you where you just can't sleep because there's too much energy. And it's important to know that, especially for young kids or kids who have been through trauma, sometimes you have the gas pedal on even when it's not a stressor. It could be positive events that that can put too much excitement, too much gas. If you've been to let's say a 3-year-old's birthday party, for instance, those of you who have will know that there's always one child who ends up crying, right? And that's because there's too much pressure on that gas pedal, too much excitement, too much stimulus. And it's all positive stimulus. It's very exciting. It's a birthday party and it's fun, but it's just too much energy, right? So when we think about trauma, there's a distortion that happens in the gas and the brake pedal. Now, I'm going to tell you a little story that I hope will give you a sense of that when the gas pedal is activated and when the brake pedal is activated. I'm just going to take a little drink before. So for those of you who are listening to my story, I hope this works because I'm not the best storyteller, but we're going to try. Now, I want you to imagine the scenario I'm going to tell you and really try to imagine it as much as you can. If you need to, close your eyes and really see what's going on. Imagine yourself in that actual situation. So imagine that you win a trip to a destination of your dreams. It's all expense paid. Everything is included. You get to take the trip with whoever you want. If it's with your spouse and you want them there, that's what you get. If you don't want them there, that's what you get. If it's with your best friend, that's what you get. It's the trip of your dreams, and nobody's feelings are going to be hurt. So you can just get the trip that you want. It's 2 weeks of stress-free. If you have kids, you have the best person taking care of them. You don't even have to worry about them. If you have work outside the home while you're gone, the best person imaginable is taking care of all your business, so that when you come back, there's not even accumulation of work. It is like the ideal vacation. Now, can you imagine? Do you know what that vacation would look like? What it would feel like? How relaxing and positive it could be? Can you see where you would be? Now, you've got you've won this trip, and you are so excited about it, and you get on the plane. And you've been upgraded to first class. I don't know if there's even first class planes out of Moncton. I don't know. But let's imagine there's first class. You sit down, these gorgeous seats. It's all comfortable. It's wonderful. You set up that you were going to watch this little movie. That's your favorite show. You get a drink. It's wonderful. Pilot comes on the intercom and tells you that, we're heading to our destination. It's beautiful there. It's going to be a beautiful trip. It's clear skies, and you're off to your trip. So you're in the sky. It's relaxing. You have no worries, nothing to think about. You're just enjoying your time. watching your show or reading your book, enjoying a drink, when all of a sudden the plane just kind of shakes. And you think, okay, it's just shaking a little bit. It's okay. It's nothing to worry about. And then it just kind of drops a little bit. And you think, okay, is it just me, or that was a little bit scarier? And all of a sudden it starts going down, and the plane is shooting down, and people around you are kind of flying up, and you're panicking, and you're thinking, this is the end. I'm going to die. This is the end of my life. It's over, and you're panicking and trying to make sense of this whole thing. And all of a sudden, the plane levels off, and you go back up a bit, and the pilot tells you, oh my goodness, I'm so sorry, we hit some turbulence, it should be okay now, we're not far from an airport, we're gonna land, and everything's okay. You land, you decide to go back home because you're too stressed over the trip, and that's the end of the story. Now, when I do this exercise, sometimes people tell me they felt nothing during my little story, which is a disappointment, but that's okay. Now, I'm hoping that in the story you felt, if you really got into it, you felt something when the plane started to go down. You felt a little bit of nervousness, maybe you felt kind of a pit in your stomach, or your heart beating a little bit faster. And the example is that this is just a story. It's not real life, right? And your nervous system was activated based on a story of mediocre storytelling, right? So imagine now when it's real life danger, how your body would actually react. Even when you think about watching a scary movie and you're scared and you feel it physically in your body, you know it's a movie. And your body's reacting that way. It's your brain is amazing to think that it can react to protect you even when there's not a danger. So I hope you guys can see this well. So this is what we call the window of tolerance, or our capacity to cope with stress. So on top here is what we would call the gas pedal. So it's, higher up, and here is the brake, right? So ideally, you want to be in between those two lines. So that would be a regulated nervous system. When you're in this area, you feel connected to others, you feel rested, you're capable of interacting and dealing with stressors. Now, it's normal for you to go up and down during your day. That's completely normal. You have moments where you're more on the down, what we would call hypoarousal. So arousal means your attentiveness or your awakeness, I guess, or alertness level. So moments in the day, you're more low. In other moments, you might be more hyper aroused, more attentive. But we always stay within, we don't always, but for most of the time, we stay within this window of tolerance. If we were to go over, it's because we sense a danger and our body is going to react in fight or flight or panic, or it could be like in extreme rage or aggression. If we were to go under, this happens when there's a life threat, so an extreme danger. It's even a bigger danger than this one, I would say. And this is where your body goes into freeze, and you can't react. Sometimes you could even go into shock, right? So this, the red line is someone who has experienced trauma. During their day, they go outside their tolerance level frequently. They perceive danger when there isn't a danger. They react in fight or flight when there isn't a reason an actual threat to their life. And Also, so kids who have experienced trauma, their window of tolerance tends to be smaller. So they have less room to navigate compared to someone who hasn't experienced trauma. So it could be really hard to stay in that optimal level of awakeness, of alertness, when your window isn't very big. So when you interact in a trauma-informed way, you help that child kind of create a bigger window of tolerance. So I'm going to attempt to do a little activity. Hopefully it'll work and people will participate. But I want you guys to think about what you do to put on the gas or to put on the brakes. And in the next slide here, we have a list of things that people often do to either to bring their arousal level, their alertness level up, or to calm their alertness level to bring it down. And as you'll notice, it's based on senses, pretty much. So you have oral input things, and then you have movement, which is really important way to regulate, touch, visual, and auditory. So we're just going to take out, I'm going to put 2 minutes, look at that list. And in 2 minutes, if you want to just write down stuff that you do, if you want to participate, that would be wonderful. In the chat, think something that you do that helps you regulate, or that you've noticed your children or that are in your care do. It would be wonderful if you want to share. So we're going to do 2 minutes. I'm just going to read a few. I know a few people did give some examples: chew gum, listen to music, stand up from their chair, move, suck on a sour candy, twist hair, watch lava lamp. But it might not be clear for some people. The slide might not be clear. And Annette says, I just wanted to read that. We have tried many strategies with our clients, depends on the child and what they prefer. One child for movement posted sticky notes on the bottom of chairs and had to run up the stair, post sticky note on the wall and go down, pick another, and so on. So basically, stuff that engages your senses will help you regulate. Whether when you think of senses, so stuff you can taste, eating a pickle is one, chewing gum, smoking a cigarette. For some people, they smoke cigarettes to regulate, absolutely. Hopefully not our kids. Movement is extremely regulating. Squirming in your chair, moving, tapping your toes, dancing, rocking your body. For touch, you can, kids who fidget with stuff always, drumming their fingers, petting an animal, for sure. For looking at, a sunset can be really regulating. Listening to music, certain sounds can be soothing as well. Um, uh, I have in my office a clock that ticks, that does the tick-tock sound, and which I find relaxing. And I have several of clinicians when we meet, they're just like that TikTok is driving me nuts, right? So it's interesting to see some people, some certain sounds find it relaxing, while others, it can be irritating, for instance. And have you thought about stuff that your kids are in your care do? Sometimes it can seem like an irritating, something that's really irritating, but if we look at it from um, an attempt to regulate their energy, their emotions, it can have a different kind of, we can see it differently. My daughter, who is 6.5, when she was younger and was going to just daycare before school, in the morning when I would drop her off before daycare, she would often chew on her jacket every morning on our way to daycare, chew on that jacket. And it would drive me nuts because it would get all wet and gross. And I hated the fact that she was always chewing on it. And then at one point, I realized that for her, she loved daycare, but daycare is also the gas pedal, right? There's lots of noises and excitement and sounds and friends and all sorts of stuff going on. And it can be, she did have some separation anxiety as well. So going to daycare could be challenging sometimes for her. And I realized that she was chewing on her jacket as a way to self-regulate, to prepare for her day at daycare, to calm whatever nerves that she was having. And once I realized that, the jacket was still gross, but it's like I accepted it more because I understood where it came from, where the behavior came from. So we're gonna do a little pause to see if we have any questions. I'm just gonna read what you guys wrote. Listening to music, lavender. Yes, awesome. Take slow, deep breaths, twist hair, rocking. Weighted blankets. Yeah. Do we have any questions before we keep going? Okay, we'll keep going. Okay, so now we're going to talk about the brain some more and brain development. All right, so this is a simple image of our brain. Our brain has two sections, a right brain, left brain. Left brain is more logical, it likes order. Right brain is more creative, emotional. When we connect with someone by recognizing their emotions, by speaking in a soft tone, we connect right brain to right brain. This kind of activates our social engagement instead of our survival reaction. So as a parent or caretaker, it's really important to modulate, I don't know if that's a word, to regulate, I guess, your emotions and the way you speak in a calm manner so that you can really connect right brain to right brain. So in the brain, This little area here is called the amygdala. I like to call it the guard dog. The amygdala is responsible for the survival response, for the fight, flight, or freeze, and it is always scanning for danger. Now, to the amygdala, anything that's new can be perceived as danger. Anything that's very different or out of the ordinary or unknown is often perceived as danger. So that's important to know. So some kids have a lot of trouble with transitions, changes to their schedule, for instance. Well, that might be their amygdala that sees the change or the difference as a danger. And the amygdala has a really important value. It protects us. It creates survival of the species because it protects us. But sometimes it can kind of see danger where it's not. The other area behind here is the hippocampus, and that's the timekeeper. It's responsible for collecting memories. So the hippocampus and the amygdala work together. When we're stressed or scared, the hippocampus is affected as well, and it makes things harder to remember. I don't know if you've ever had a child that thought they were in trouble and is trying to tell you what happened, and their story makes no sense. It's all out of order, and they start at the end, and it makes no sense. It's because their timekeeper, that hippocampus and amygdala was thought, I'm in trouble, danger. Hippocampus can't make sense of what happened when. So in a child that's kind of underdeveloped, but as an adult, it can also have an effect. Okay, and so I have another little video for you guys. It's called the hand-brain model, and it's a concept that was developed by Dan Siegel. Oops, 1 second. Go out of this video.
One of the most rewarding experiences for me has been to study brain science and apply it to the experience of parenting. And the hand model of the brain that I use to teach parents is very useful to understand that. So if you take your thumb and put it in the middle of your palm, put your fingers over the top, this is a very useful model of the brain. And when we can actually see in front of us what's going on in the brain, then we can change what the brain does. So let me walk you through very basically what happens in this brain and the structures in it. And it goes like this. The spinal cord comes up representing the wrist, and then you have coming up into the skull the brain stem and the limbic area, which work together to help regulate arousal and your emotions and the way you have a fight, flight, freeze response. These are below the cortex, the limbic and brainstem areas, and the cortex is this higher part of the brain that allows us to perceive the outside world, to think and reason. And this frontmost part of the brain, right behind your forehead, so the person's oriented like this, is actually the part that regulates the subcortical, limbic, and brainstem areas. This regulation is very important because sometimes we can have all sorts of things happen in our life. We're tired, we're exhausted, someone pushes a particular emotional button, and we can flip our lids. So rather than being tuned in and connected and balanced and flexible, we can lose all of that flexibility, even lose moral reasoning, and act in ways that are terrifying to others, including our children. Now, you can actually bring yourself back online and come back to the high road and make a repair with your child, and that's important to explain to them. And you can also use this hand model of the brain to explain to children, even as young as 5 and 6, how to understand when their emotions are rising up from the brainstem and limbic areas here, and how it's overriding the prefrontal area and making it so they may be about to flip their lids. So I've had kids come tell me that they're about to go flip their lids and they need a break. They need a timeout. And by even just naming that, they can tame it. And that's the power of using the hand model for ourselves and our children to help us all make sense of what goes on in the emotional communication that we have in the course of day-to-day life.
Okay, so I really love that hand-brain model because it really explains to you that concept of how there's two parts to your brain, right? And we've all had moments when we flip our lid, or our kids flip their lid, where we're really not connected to, there's no reasoning going on. And that's a really important concept to remember as parents, and even, adults, people we work with, we've all seen people flip their lid, and so it's very important. We can also think about the brain as a house. It's another way of thinking about it. So when we build a house, we start with the foundation or the basement, right? That's what comes first. So if we think of our brain, or even in the hand, the bottom part is the basement, the foundation. It's more primitive. It's not as fancy, let's say, when we think about a house, right? And the downstairs brain, it is responsible for basic functions such as breathing and our heart rate. It acts like a thermometer for our body and to regulate all kinds of bodily functions. It's also where the survival response, so the fight, flight, or freeze, where that exists. And it's also where we find strong emotions like anger and fear. When you think about evolution, the evolution of man, our downstairs brain would be considered our primitive brain. It's what the brain that we had before we became human, when we were animal. It's like an animal's brain. The upstairs brain is where we think, where we create, where we problem solve. It's the part of the brain that makes us human. So one of the things that the upstairs brain does as well is responsible for calming the downstairs brain. So on the upstairs brain, like I said, it's where you thinking, imagining, planning. That's where it's all takes place. And when you think about the hand-brain model, you really need that to have that upstairs brain help the downstairs brain calm, because in the downstairs brain is where those big emotions lie. So that role of the upstairs brain is really to calm the downstairs brains at different moments. You can imagine a kind of a stairway that goes between the basement and the upstairs, and information flows between the two freely, right? But then when an alarm sounds, or there's a major danger, it's like that stairway becomes blocked, and you can't access that the upstairs brain. You can't think, you can't reason. So I'm sure you've experienced moments with your kids, even sometimes with adults, where you're trying to tell them to calm down, or you're trying to tell them to do something, and they're completely flipped their lid. They're not connected at all. Their upstairs and downstairs brain are not connected. So all these words you're throwing at them, okay, stop doing that. Don't throw the ball. Don't do this. They're not even hearing you. They're not reasoning. There's no connection being made. So in those moments, it's important to think of that hand-brain model and think, okay, they're disconnected right now. They can't reason because their upstairs brain, they don't have access to it in this moment of disconnection. So we're going to talk about how to reconnect that upstairs to the downstairs. Also, the So the basement comes first, right? That's the first part. So when you're born, that primitive basement is already developed to make sure that your breathing keeps going, your heartbeat keeps going, and all that stuff. And then the upstairs brain starts to be developed around the age 2, when we see the first words appear, for instance. That's when we see that upstairs brain starts to develop. When I was talking earlier about that moment when you can't reason with a child, well, think about a tantrum. A toddler having a tantrum. You can't reason with a child having a tantrum, and that's because that upstairs brain isn't fully developed either. So they don't have the capacity to calm themselves because that development hasn't taken place. So they can't regulate themselves. They can't regulate those emotions. The upstairs brain is also in development up until the early 20s. In the teen years, there's kind of a renovation that goes on in the brain, which is a really important time, because when there's a renovation, like a renovation of the house, it's to better the environment, right? It's to become better. So that renovation is really important. There's a ton of new connections going on in a teen brain, and as well, they kind of prune or get rid of connections that aren't really used anymore. So it's a moment that is really where there's a lot of learning going on in teenagers, where there's a lot of development. But with any renovation, if you've ever had a renovation, like if you're renovating your bathroom, well, sometime during the renovation, that bathroom is not accessible, which can be problematic, right? Well, the same kind of thing is going on in a teenager's brain. Sometimes some parts of their brain is just not accessible. So adolescents can sometimes make decisions that seem completely unreasonable, and that's because of that renovation going on. But it's also a really important time to develop new connections, and a time where a lot of trauma repair can happen. So that's a positive thing. My sister, who has boys who are adults now, when they were teenagers, she used to say that they would share one brain between them and all of their friends. And sometimes she would say, well, this week he doesn't have the brain. It must be one of his friends that has the brain, because he's making decisions that don't make sense. So I like to think of that about teenagers. Sometimes the connections aren't being made, and that's okay, because they're also learning a whole bunch of wonderful stuff at the same time. So Bruce Perry, who is an amazing psychiatrist for children and youth, who has a ton of wonderful books, he uses the term regulate, relate, and reason. So when someone has flipped their lid, that their upstairs brain is not connected to their downstairs brain, you can't start by reasoning. You can't reason with them when they're disconnected. The first thing you need to do is regulate. Regulate yourself. Are you calm? Are you connected to your emotions? Are you managing that energy in your body? The second step would be to relate to the person. So connect right brain to right brain, validating their emotions, listening to them, having a calm voice to discuss what's going on. And then finally, once they have that calm, it's to reason. So there is no use trying to reason with a child who is not connected, who has flipped their lid, just like a child having a tantrum. Now, it's really easy to remember, not always easy, I shouldn't say that, but it's easier to remember that a child who is 3 years old and having a tantrum can't understand what you're trying to do or trying to connect with. It's harder when it's a 15-year-old having a tantrum or an adult having a tantrum, because we know that they can get dysregulated. We know that they can get their upstairs and downstairs brain aren't connecting, and they can be throwing a tantrum. So it's harder to be empathetic to an older child having that sort of reaction. But really, it's the same thing. They have the same capacity to regulate, I guess. So when a child is dysregulated, either a young child who hasn't developed that capacity to self-regulate, or if it's a child who has experienced trauma and hasn't been able to learn how to regulate their emotions, or kind of has a distortion there, they need to have a nervous system that is regulated to model how it's done. I'm not sure if I'm explaining it right. My words are a bit mixed up, but I mean, you as the adult will act as a mirror of what a regulated nervous system looks like, so that the child can regulate themselves based on your regulated system. So what I mean by that is that you need to be calm, you need to regulate the energy in your body, you need to make sure that your voice is your tone is soft, and that's the way that you mirror a regulated nervous system, so that the child can learn to regulate themselves. So an example of that is if you've had if you've a parent to a young baby, and with young babies, we're tired, we're exhausted, and if you've ever tried to calm a baby when you're not calm, it's impossible. You know, it's the middle of the night and you're exhausted, and baby's crying, and you're crying too because you're so tired, and you're just, and they don't stop crying because you're not regulated. So it's really hard to help someone get regulated if you're not regulated. Okay. So again, kids don't understand their nervous system. Actually, many adults don't understand their nervous system. They don't understand how their brain has been impacted by trauma. Their understanding is shaped by when the trauma happened, at what age. Self-regulation is kind of like a muscle. You got to practice it. You got to learn how to regulate your own emotions. It's something you have to do often in order to get better at it. And even, you know, us as adults, you have a ton of moments every day where you can practice self-regulation. Whenever, you know, maybe it's a coworker that irritates you, and every time they do, I don't know, they do something, it just really annoys you. Well, that can be an opportunity to do like a check. You know, am I regulated? Are my own emotions regulated? Is this person activating something in me because of whatever issue? So there's a ton of little moments in your day where you can practice that. And that's important to practice when it's not the big tantrum or a big aggression in a child. Moments like that where it's not as big a threat, it's important to practice during those times. So things that help regulate is, like we met the screen that I showed earlier, movement, any kind of activating the senses is something that really regulates. You know, I think about those pillows with sequins on it, you know, that some kids like to rub that, and that's really calming. Play is very regulating. Laughter is very regulating. Repetition is also regulating, and predictability is very regulating. Young children love to watch the same movie over and over and over again. And if you have young children, you watch, Frozen 10,000 times because they love the predictability of knowing what's going to happen. They feel safe in that. That when, the hero might be in danger, they know it's going to be okay, and they love that predictability. So structure and predictability really helps regulate children. Also, a child's reaction can often depend on the adult's reaction. I don't know if you've ever seen a child who, stumbles and falls, and then will stop and look back to see, if mom or dad are going to react. And if you go, you're okay, they're okay. And if you go, oh my God, then they start to cry. So they respond to our reaction a lot. I'm going to take a second to see if we have any questions. Is there a way to convince child to buy into trying strategies? In the sense of get them interested in it, I'm assuming. Like, I think, I think the best way would be to not have them realize it's a strategy. So to make it fun and make it a part of every day. So when we think about practicing strategies, it shouldn't be something you only do when you're dysregulated. It should be part of every day, because if it's only when they're dysregulated, they're going to be like, no, I don't want to practice my strategies right now, right? We choose ones he loves, however he bucks. So do you have moments where you can practice when it's not a stressful situation, Carrie? That he does regulating activities in moments of non-stress will do during those times. So you do have moments where you kind of practice strategies, but it's not a stressful time. It's hard. The more you do it, the more that they will access it when they need it. It's kind of like when we think about a fire practice. We do a fire practice to prepare for, and if there's a fire, we know what to do. Our brain knows what to do. So we do it over and over again, how to get out if there's a fire, so that when there is a fire, we don't really have to think about it. Our body, our brain already knows what to do. So it's hard to do as a parent, but you need to practice it a lot so it gets integrated. So Suzanne added, does he have ones that he chooses, like rocking, being alone, bike riding? Okay, so he chooses things during calm times, but when it comes into a moment where he's flipped his lid, he might not be able to choose his strategies, or doesn't want to. I think that's normal. It's just you got to keep practicing it, and one day he's gonna surprise you and actually do it.